Lee Summit keeps landing on best places to live list, and most of it's earned, but there are things about this city that the rankings don't tell you. I've been in Lee Summit for over 20 years. I've sold real estate here for 12 of them. I'm going to give you 5 real pros and 4 real cons. No sugarcoating. If you're thinking about moving here, this is the video that you need to watch first. The pros. Top tier schools. Lee Summit, R7 ranks 52nd out of 553 districts in Missouri. Math proficiency sits at 54% versus the state average of 40%. Reading is 53% versus state average of 43%. 3 high schools, strong special education program, community that actually shows up for school events. For families, this is usually the #1 reason they choose Lee Summit over anything else. Most of the time, most parents are happy with the school district in Lee Summit. It lives up to its billing overall. It can be a little overwhelming though. The schools are big, there are a lot of kids, and sometimes, depending on budgeting, the class sizes are large. For some kids, they just don't thrive in that environment. But for most families, it delivers exactly what the ratings promise. 2, massive growth and investment. Over $1.4 billion in active development projects. We've talked about it, Discovery Park, Oldham East Village, and more. Lee Summit has over $1.4 billion there. Discovery Park is a 268-acre mixed-use project on the I-470 corridor. Oldham East Village is bringing a Costco, Chick-fil-A, Q39 barbecue, and 300 plus apartments. And the LDS Church has listed 1,800 acres for development. This isn't speculation. Dirt is moving, permits are pulled, and home values in the surrounding neighborhoods are already responding. And we already have 2 solid shopping centers, Summit Woods Crossing, which is the oldest, and Summit Fair. Both have full directories of retail and restaurants. You don't need to leave town for anything. The one thing people keep asking for is a Trader Joe's. Now that Costco's coming, Trader Joe's is the #1 request. The third pro, the cost of living is below the national average. The overall cost of living runs about 12% below the U.S. average, despite being a top-ranked suburb. Lee Summit scores 88.4 on the Best Places Cost of Living Index, and that's about 12% below the national average. Missouri's income tax tops out at 4.8% versus 5.7% in Kansas. Lee Summit's tax is 7.85 versus 9.1 in Overland Park. You get top tier at below average prices. #4 pro, a real downtown with a real community. Award-winning downtown district with restaurants, events, farmers markets, and walkable blocks. Lee Summit has something most don't, a walkable, vibrant downtown. A year-round farmers market, locally owned restaurants, live music, seasonal events. The American Planning Association named it one of the great neighborhoods in America. It's not just a suburb you sleep in. It's a place you actually want to be in on a Saturday afternoon. Interesting fact, Drew Lock, the NFL quarterback, is from Lee Summit. His dad owned several restaurants with some other people here in town, including 3rd Street Social. Sadly, he recently passed away. That's the kind of community this is, though. People who make it big still have roots here. My go-to Saturday in downtown Lee Summit starts with eating. If I'm looking for something casual, Main Street Pizza is really good if you want a bigger meal. I always recommend 3rd Street Social. It's a restaurant on 3rd Street with a large menu and a great variety. After the meal, there's a lot to do. They have an arcade alley if you want to play games, but my favorite is the exit room. It's a breakout room experience and it's a blast. Then you end the night walking downtown, hitting up some of the other bars and grills. 5th, crime rate. Violent crime rate is 58% below the national average, and the latest stats show crime actually dropped over 10%. Lee Summit's violent crime rate sits at 149 per 100,000 people. That's 58% below the national average. and nearly 68% below Missouri's state average. And here's what's interesting. With all the growth happening, the crime stats were just released and crime actually went down over 10%. The police department is highly thought of in this community. Safety taxes typically pass with about an 80% approval rate. That tells you everything you need to know about how the residents feel about their police department. I'll tell you a quick story. During my patrol duties, back when I was on day shift, I would typically start my day by going to the local Quick Trip to get a drink. Almost every day, a citizen would come up and tell me, thank you for the job I was doing. Also, as I mentioned, when public safety is on the ballot, it typically passes with an around 80% voting for the issue. You certainly don't hear that in many other cities. That's the kind of community that Lee Summit is. Let's talk about the cons. Jackson County property tax headaches. Jackson County reassessments have been controversial and unpredictable. Most of Lee Summit sits in Jackson County, which has had a well-documented issues with property tax assessments being too high. The 2023 reassessment cycle created real confusion. Values jumped in ways that didn't always match the market, and the appeals process was a mess. A judge actually ruled that Jackson County had to pay Lee Summit in a lawsuit over the 2023 assessments. The taxes themselves are manageable, about 1.11% effective rate, but uncertainty around assessments is a legitimate frustration. One thing worth knowing, if you're 62 or older and eligible for Social Security, you can freeze your property taxes. The county can still raise them on everyone else, but your rate locks in. If the levy changes, there might be a small adjustment, but nothing like what everyone else sees. A lot of people don't know about this. The Jackson County tax reassessment was a fiasco. It really hurt my clients on fixed income when their taxes went up $800, $900, even $1,000 a year. That's a lot of money that they had to pull from somewhere else. What I tell people now is there's a process and they're working through it. The person who was in charge got recalled and kicked out of office. They've appointed a new guy who's been pretty proactive about getting it fixed, but I still hear stories about taxes that haven't been corrected. And the downside is even when they were overtaxed, they're not getting that money back all at once. They're refunding it over a 3-year period. The second con, the commute can be rough. 26 to 35 minutes to downtown Kansas City in ideal conditions, longer during I-70 construction. Lee Summit sits about 19 miles from downtown Kansas City, roughly 26 to 30 minutes on a good day, but I-70 is currently under major construction. Depending on your route, that commute can push past 40 minutes during rush hour. If you work downtown 5 days a week, that's a real consideration. If you're remote or hybrid, it's much less of an issue. What I tell people is if they can set their own schedule, try to work at 7 in the morning and get off at 3 or 4, or start at 9 and get off at 5 or 6. That way you avoid the worst traffic jam that happens here. It makes a real difference. And number 3, the weather is extreme. Brutal summers, cold winters, hailstorms, and tornado season. If you're coming from a mild climate, Kansas City weather will be an adjustment. Summers hit 95 to 100 with high humidity. Winters drop below freezing regularly. Spring brings hail and tornado season, and hail is why homeowners' insurance costs are more here than the national average. It's manageable, but it's not something to discover after you move. Number 4, it's still a suburb. There's really no nightlife, limited walkability outside of downtown. You need a car for almost everything. Lee Summit has a great downtown, but outside of those few blocks, you're driving everywhere. There's no real nightlife scene, no public transit worth relying on. If you're coming from a walkable city and that matters to you, this will be an adjustment. Lee Summit is a great place to raise a family. It's not a great place if you want urban energy. The biggest con clients mention after they've been here is the amount of theft from the autos. If you leave your car unlocked, eventually somebody's going to steal out of it. That's kind of a Debbie Downer. The other thing is traffic. It's continuing to grow, and as the city tries to fix the infrastructure, closing roads and closing lanes creates an even bigger problem while they're doing it. Who this video is for. If you're relocating and want the unfiltered version of what Lee Summit is really like, this is it. If you're comparing Lee Summit to other Kansas City suburbs, now you know the trade-offs. If you're already here and just nodding along, share this with somebody who's thinking about moving. That's 5 pros, 4 cons with no spin. Lee Summit earns its reputation, but it's not perfect. No place is. The question is whether the pros line up with what matters most to you. If you want to talk through whether Lee Summit is the right fit for your situation, email me at info@movingwithmark.com. Drop a comment with the pro or con that surprised you the most. Subscribe for more honest KC Metro breakdowns, and I will see you on the next video.